Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour, brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department. We're coming to you today from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom. We'll also inform you the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you're new to using technology in the classroom or a seasoned vet, we are here to help. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas, the Bearded Tech Ed Guy. You can find me out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Bearded Tech Ed, or you can even find me on my brand new website, beardedtechedguy.com. In case you missed it, the latest blog post went out, and it's all about a flipped classroom and is it right for you in your classroom. As you know, we've transitioned more to a one-to-one model with laptops, especially 3 through 12. We also have started to begin the process of the take-home, which many schools are doing and are being very successful at. So it now starts to beg the question, how do we adapt concepts like flipped classroom and blended classrooms into our own practices? So this blog post actually talks about what a flipped classroom is, what it looks like, benefits. Also, we talk about some of the downsides, which I don't think are really downsides overall, but I really encourage you to go check out the blog posts over at you can find it on my site, actually, beardedtechedguy.com, and you can also find it on my SPS under We Learn Blogs. In there, we have a great video that shows one school that is doing it really well, and we also talk about different ways that students are using it in the classroom. So I highly encourage you to go and check those things out. In case you missed it, we have a couple of huge updates coming up with Unified Classroom in regards to using Microsoft OneDrive. So on May 10th is the expected date. So we're all crossing our fingers and praying that that's the actual date that everything will go through. And I encourage you, once that happens, to come back, listen to the podcast, check out the blog posts, check out Yammer, where we post all of our information, and we'll have good details for you to understand these changes, which include embedding assignments that you create through the Global Create onto class pages, and being able to have a handout function where students can do your work right in Unified and then turn around and hand it right back in. So look for those updates. They're coming very soon, and we'll have more details on them as time goes along. That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next is our interview of the week. So for this week's interview of the week, I spent time with Karla Gartsu over at Glickman Elementary School. She is a former librarian, now tech teacher over there, and she's doing a lot of great things in the classroom. Listen in, and I hope you're inspired.
My name is Karla Gartsu, and we are at Glickman Elementary School right now. I've been teaching in Springfield for the past 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was teaching in Holyoke, and before that, I was a public librarian in Southbridge, Mass. And when I was in Springfield these past 3 years, I was at DeBerry School and Talmadge, each of them 50%.
For our listeners, 50% means that you're half-time at one school, half-time at another.
Right.
And then so every 2 weeks, you've spent a week at one school, pretty much?
No, the way it was set up, I would be at DeBerry 2.5 days and Talmadge 2.5 days, and so that half day was on a Monday. So I'd be at, I think, Talmadge in the morning and then DeBerry in the afternoon.
So have you been teaching technology all this time, or...?
Yes and no. So my technology license is fairly new. I just got that this past year. However, in graduate school, the program that you do for library is pretty much identical to what you do for the technology degree. They're really interchangeable. I mean, theoretically, I think it should be called a library media specialist degree. Even though I worked as a school librarian the past several years, I was always working with technology. So yeah, I was teaching technology skills.
Since you got your license recently, can you tell us about that process? Because I believe that's something that's kind of new-ish, like the new process for going about getting that particular license.
I mean, basically, like with any license that you go for through DESE, it has the drop-down menus, and you figure out what you have and what you don't have. And what I found really interesting was, even though I'd already had the library license, when I went for the technology license the way it is now, prior to what's, it's changing now. But all of the requirements were the same, were literally identical to any of the requirements that I had to have to get the library license. I don't know why they're not just the same. I think probably, I don't know, whoever makes those rules just doesn't realize it's really the same program.
Same program.
Yeah.
So let's hear about some of those early years of using technology.
Sure.
In Holyoke or your library in Southbridge.
Yep.
Or even here.
Okay, so way back when in Southbridge, I'll start there. Some of the ways that we use technology, and again, that was a public library running a children's program, so I wasn't in an academic setting per se. And we actually, our beginning stages of using technology was really just like inviting the kids in for programs and using games like the Wii, which was really popular back then, or Rock Band, that Rockstar or Rock Band, I forget what it is now.
Rock Band. I have it in my basement.
Guitar Hero, that's what it was, yep. And the dance mat and all of that kind of stuff. Then we started to get really fancy and had a website, which this was way back, like when I was it like HTML coding or whatever or something, and I had to learn how to do that, which was horrible. I hated it. It was not fun. It was not intuitive. It was, if anyone had told me I would have to do that for a career, I probably would have run to do something else. I didn't like it. The main way I feel like I used technology towards the end of my public library career, and then when I went to teach in Holyoke, was a lot in what I did as a librarian, and those were for the research skills that we did with kids, teaching them how to use databases, the state databases, the Massachusetts state databases, how to search appropriately. I mean, I think these days kids think everything is Siri. You just speak into a speaker and say, what is the whatever. But we really had to teach kids, or I taught kids, how to use databases, how to look for information using keywords. It was probably more difficult to start a search back then than it is today. But I think it was more precise, because I think today, like I said, kids just think you ask a question and the answer is going to pop up. So yeah,
I know my kids at home, like when we have our Google Home set up just to listen to music, it's a great little speaker.
Yep.
They'll be like, "Hey Google, tell me a joke."
Exactly.
Or "Hey Google, what's the temperature?"
I'm afraid to have one of those in my
theater and thermometer right by the window.
It's amazing. It scares me in a lot of ways, because I think that kids are just I don't know. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I think that we're thinking a lot less. Kids. One of the things that I've started to do with the kids recently is a lot more of the coding and that kind of stuff for computer science. And as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, okay, this is definitely teaching them how to think, because there's no room for mistakes. There's no room for error. Like if every step is not done properly or correctly, the next step will not work. So I'm thinking inherently that's a really good way for kids to learn, especially in a time where I do feel like they don't have to think as much anymore. So I forgot why I even started to answer this. Oh, the thermometer and the clock. Yeah. I mean, kids, everything is so instant. And if the answer is not there for them right away, their frustration level, from what I can see, is just sky high, and I don't know, kind of scary, really.
Because of your work working in the library and now being a classroom teacher, do you feel that you still focus in a lot on those research skills, which are incredibly important, even at a young age that these guys are now? Like they're the next up to try to graduate from middle school, graduate from high school, and
be responsible for taking care of us when we get old. So yes, absolutely. I teach them how to evaluate information. I always feel like if there were one word that I could use for what do I teach or what should we teach, it's how to think. I've always had this belief that it's not important that we know the answer. It's important that we know how and where to find the answer, because other than that, everything could just be memory. And I don't know that that serves people well for when they really need to do something, take action or take care of themselves. But do I feel like I'm using my library skills more or research more? I think I do, just because I think that kids need to understand that I always say to the kids, what's the process? I start out most of my lessons with, this is the process. And then I'll ask them, what does it mean? Usually, hopefully, they'll answer me with, it means to do. So we talk about how we do, what we do. And just that that a process is an action. It's doing something to get to what you need to get to. As far as the like tools and stuff for technology, the creative stuff is what I love. When I was in Holyoke, we used to do a lot of, for the research projects, we do a lot of, I've forgotten what it's called already, but it's not popular anymore because it's already old technology, but it would be like a, I can't believe I can't think of what it's called. I'm sorry, but it's like a digital bulletin board. It's like, they would insert their pictures and the text and whatever, so that they were no longer doing their bulletin boards. A Glogster. Thank you. It was a Glogster. So they were no longer presenting their projects on sort of just like this one-dimensional platform, and everybody's looked the same, and it was kind of boring, and the only great ones were the ones that the kids' parents did when they were at home. So I think that got a lot of kids interested in doing projects online, or digitally rather. When I was in graduate school, I remember learning like tons of tools for different kinds of just different platforms for presentation of information, showing what you've learned. And kind of what I think now, I thought all of those things were really cool at the time. But what I think now is that they're all kind of the same thing. They're just a different brand of how to do the same thing, which is really to insert information. It's a picture, it's text, it's sound, it's whatever. There's just different platforms to use. So now that I'm in a school that's a Microsoft school, I'm trying really to stick to those platforms because I feel like they're sort of the basics. And if you can master those, then you can transfer that skill into all of the other commercial type platforms that are out there for kids.
Right. So like using PowerPoint and
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Once you get those, then you could transfer that skill into pretty much any other thing you buy, website design, all of that. Actually, we were doing website design last week. It was fun.
So you were doing website design last week. What program were you using to do that?
For that, I ended up checking into Weebly educational platform. I didn't love it because a lot of the pictures that were available to the kids were they weren't kid friendly. They just weren't fun to look at. They were more sort of business oriented or whatever. We did that. I did that with the one of the 5th grade classes. And then I did not continue with that lesson because I'm still looking for something that's more friendly with the kids to use, a little bit easier and a little bit more fun. So
yeah. So let's talk about some of the things that you're doing this year.
Sure.
So you mentioned coding earlier.
Yes.
We talked about using Sway and PowerPoint, and you were just talking about using Weebly for kids doing websites.
Right.
So what are some of the things that you have felt have been really successful with the kids?
Definitely the coding. They love it. We use tinker.com and we use code.org for the 4th and 5th graders. For the younger kids, I've even been using just some of the really basic stuff like a computer in front of me. I can tell you what they are. I'm sorry. Like Bot Logic and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank at the moment. But a lot of the really basic early ones for the kids. So it's not even necessarily block coding yet. It's literally just moving. And I have found actually that using the unplugged activities is so important. And when I first started doing some of the projects with the kids, I believed that the unplugged activities were important, but I wasn't sure if that was okay because I'd never taught technology before. And I thought, oh no, are they going to think I'm not teaching technology because I have paper and pencil out, and am I doing the right thing? So I was a little bit insecure with that. But at our last PD, it was actually the CS program, and we focused a lot on the CS unplugged activities. And so it felt good to be validated that, yes, those are really important for the kids to learn. So sometimes the kids get upset. They're like, oh, how come we're not on the computers? But,
right. But it's really important for them to understand how to, the process of thinking and problem solving.
Right.
Which is what a lot of computer science is. It's all problem solving.
Exactly.
Do you have a favorite unplugged activity?
You know what? I do, actually. And as simple as this is, I love it. So we start with... the younger kids enjoyed this as well. So we'll talk about an algorithm. We'll start out talking about algorithms and, we'll talk about, what did you do to get ready for school today? And what were the steps you needed to take? And sometimes we'll get really silly and talk about, if you put your socks on after your shoes? Would that work? And how do we go back and fix it? And the kids have fun with that. They start to get it, that there's a reason we do things in a certain order. Mm-hmm. And then for sort of like the exit ticket out, when we do that activity, some of the kids are robots and some of the kids are the programmers. And they have to leave the room by programming the kids, like, how many steps forward, and then a 45-degree turn or a 180-degree turn to, mm-hmm. Make their turn so that they can effectively get around the tables and around any obstacles and then out the door. And they love that. They actually mm-hmm. end up making mistakes so they can come back and play it again. But I like that.
Like
that's
directly running into a table.
Exactly. And that's fun. Mm-hmm. I like doing that with them.
Yeah. And so I just realized that on this podcast, we haven't really talked about what an unplugged activity is. Could you explain that for our listeners?
Yep. So basically it's doing whatever it is that you would do on the computer. You're actually doing it by hand or physically with your mm-hmm. body by moving. So if you were doing some programming where you were having, making a character move, forward 3 steps or pixels or whatever, and then, turning right and then stopping to pick something up, or in a game it would be, whatever, to grab an object. Mm-hmm. Unplugged would be where we have the kids actually making those movements to do it. Mm-hmm. That's physically with the unplugged activities. But then we also do them on paper. So the kids would, draw arrows or whatever, 3 arrows forward, 1 to the right, and keep doing that so that they can understand the process of moving. So anything that you would normally do on a computer, you're doing it on paper first. And just sort of for the kids, I think it helps them make that connection for what is actually happening in the computer. And I also think it helps the kids to realize that it's them, it's their brain that's creating what happens in the computer. The computer does not have its own brain. You are programming the computer.
And we're all very happy that the computer does not have its own brain.
The kids think it does, right?
In Terminator
right.
2's
They think Siri lives in there. They really do. Oh.
Unplugged activities. What about favorite activity that you have done that was not unplugged?
I have a new favorite, actually, that I really like. I like animation. And recently, I don't know if you've heard this Red Ball challenge that a lot of schools are doing. And it's this animation challenge where it's done. I think it was originally done in Google Slides, but obviously you can do it in PowerPoint. So the kids take their slides and they insert a red ball, and then they have to make the red ball move in anywhere around the screen that they want to. But wherever it ends in the screen, the person sitting next to them needs to start their presentation picked up where that person to their left, where their red ball left off, and then they have to make theirs move and end up, and it just keeps going mm-hmm. consecutively. So if you line up all of the computers in a row, it would look like this red ball is traveling down all of these computers, and you can put music to it. And I think that's fun. Not only does it look cool, but it's tedious, and mm-hmm. the kids have to stop for every single slide to make the ball look like it's moving. And if nothing else, I think it helps them to slow down. Mm-hmm. And focus, because I think the kids, everything they do on the computer is just always, it's games and it's fun and it's fast and it's loud. And honestly, that's like what turns me off of technology. Mm-hmm. So that digital challenge, that animation challenge, I like because it forces them to slow down.
One of the questions that I always like to end interviews on is every year there's a whole slew of new teachers into the district.
Yeah.
Some have been teaching for a while. Some are fresh out of college,
yep.
So fresh-faced. During the beginning of the year, there's always a lot of advice given. They have their new hire orientation.
Yeah.
If you had the opportunity to stand in front of them, what kind of advice would you give them? Whether it's with technology or in general, or because as we both know, teaching's difficult.
It is.
Anytime we can get some good advice.
Well, a couple of things. I think first, as far as technology goes, not to be overwhelmed by it. I think that things come so fast, and I feel like even in the 3 years I've been in the district, 3.5 years, there's always sort of these new innovations or these new things like, let's try this, let's try that. And I really think that whatever you want to use, like whatever tool you find that you really like, you need to give it more than a year for it to really unfold and to work out the kinks and for things to be comfortable. But I also think that sometimes there's too much thrown at us. And so I would probably say to a teacher, yes, we have to do things digitally. That's we're responsible for that. We are required. But rather than trying to do too many things, really just pick like one or two things that you're comfortable with, that you like, and just focus on those. So that would be my digital advice. You know what else I think? We do it in this school, and I love it, but we practice mindfulness, and we do like the tapping technique, and we do breathing. And I think I would tell a new teacher, no matter how overwhelming things feel, I mean, you might be in front of a class that you just look around and think, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. I think that if you stop in that moment and you do something really simple, even if it's just like the hands up signal, and you just wait and you breathe and you pause, that then you will collect the rest of the group, and they'll come to that same place. And then you can regroup and go on with your lesson. But I think if you try to fight the stress with stress in the moment, you can't compete with that chaos in the classroom. So I think for a new teacher to just really realize that the best thing you can do first is just get that class. I don't like to use the word control but just to get that classroom. Get a handle on the classroom chaos. Find a way to just calm it down, and then you'll go forward. Even if it takes like the whole first week of school, the whole first 3 weeks of school, whatever it takes to set that tone, you'll get a lot more done the rest of the year.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I know it's the end of the day, so
it is.
Like you, I won't mind going home.
No,
so,
I still have a lot of work to do, but no, thank you.
Thanks, Karla, for your time that we got to spend in your classroom and just talking about the ways that you're using technology and how the librarian licenseship is not that different from what you're expecting now with having the tech license. So, for those of you who are interested in thinking about switching up what you're doing, Karla would be a great person to talk to about how to prepare for that license switch if you are interested. And she's doing a lot of great things in the classroom, and I really want to emphasize the idea of the unplugged lessons. A lot of times when we think of technology tools, we think that you actually have to use technology to get them. But a lot of computer science is all about algorithms and thinking and problem solving. Many of those things you can do without actually having the computer in front of you, especially for the younger grades as you're trying to build up those thinking skills. These unplugged activities are great entrances for everybody into computer science. So thank you for sharing that. All the tools that she mentioned, I am going to put in our show notes with links to them. For those of you who listen on whatever listening platform you choose, I do implore you to go out there and give us a review, give us some stars, help us bump up the charts of being one of the biggest podcasts around. We'd love to hear feedback from you. If you know of someone who would be great to interview, we would love to talk with them too. For the next few weeks, we are actually not going to have any interviews. So I'm actually going to focus on just a couple of different teaching practices that have to do with technology in the classroom and things that I've gleaned from other teachers who are teaching in the classroom with technology. So we'll focus in more on flipped classrooms next week and blended classrooms, and maybe even have a little gamification talk. So that's it for this week's podcast. I am Mike Thomas, Bearded Tech Ed Guy, and this is the SBS Digital Learning Hour.